thank everybody for clicking into our show today. Today's show on Sasquatch Encounters, we have Mary from West Alabama. Hi, Mary. How are you today?
I'm doing great.
Good. I'm glad you're doing good. Hey, I want to thank you for taking the time to come in and talk to us today and sharing some of your experiences. And, it means a lot. It's for anyone who's had a sighting or an experience to be able to step forward and to let everybody know what happens so we can learn from these things.
Well, I'm excited about, telling about my encounters because I haven't had just one, but several over the past 2 years. It started back in March 2012.
Okay. Well, let's start right there. Let's talk about that particular incident, if you don't mind. What happened in March 2012?
Well, that day I had just went and got me a German Shepherd puppy, and I have a swing up under 2 oaks in my front yard. And my husband and I were sitting out there. We had the speakerphone, and my son loves German Shepherds too. We used to raise them. Mm-hmm. And I was telling my daughter-in-law how pretty he was and this and that and the other. And then all of a sudden, between my house and my grandmother's house, there was this long, guttural yell. Sounded like a man. And it sounded like he was being disemboweled alive.
Oh, wow.
And I looked at my husband. He looked at me, and I said, "What is that?" He said, "I don't know. Let me put this. I've lived in the country all my life, and I know the type of animals that are in here, and this is something that's not normal to these woods. I mean, I know what a panther sounds like. I know what a coyotes, and I know bears, but this was something different." And my daughter-in-law, like I said, I had her on speakerphone, and she says, "What was that?" I said, "I don't know." And about that time, it was a little closer, and it yelled out again. She said, y'all pulling my leg." I said, "No, we're not pulling." I said, "Can't you hear us talking while it's yelling?" And she was freaking out. And from there, it yelled again, and it was closer to the wood line. So I said, "Okay, it's time for us to go in the house." So we went in the house. Mm-hmm. Well, I had been watching, the programs about Monster Quest and looking for Bigfoot and stuff like that. And I said, I want to try this. So after that night, I started going outside, and I started making those yells. And each night I would call up. I mean, it would answer me. And every night it would get closer and closer and closer. And I told my mother, and she says, "I want to hear it. I want to hear it." And so, but it would only yell about 2 or 3 times, and then it would stop. So on March 31st, there was this huge electrical storm coming from Birmingham going southward. And I looked outside. I went out. The reason why I went outside was I was going to go see where the cloud was. And my husband was down up under the hill. He was watering the cows, and he heard me out there. And when he did, he made out a little yell. And I said, "You call that a yell? I'll make a yell." So I let out, believe me, I don't need a microphone. And I let out a yell, and about that time, it didn't sound like 1, but it sounded like 2. And it started screaming and yelling and hollering backwards and forth. Both of them were. And it was so loud that it was vibrating the air, and it even vibrated our chest.
Wow.
And it kept going on and on and on. And I said, "I'm going in the house." And I hit the house.
Sure.
And, pardon me?
I know. I said, "Sure."
I wasn't sure what was going on. I thought I made it mad or something, but I don't know if it was the electrical storm that upset it or me yelling or whatever. And it being on March 31st, I go to church the next Sunday, which was April Fool's Day.
Of course.
And I was telling my mama and daddy about it, and they wanted to come over, and my daddy told me, he said, "You're going to hell."
Oh.
he thought I was pulling his leg.
Right.
So the next night, they came over about dusty dark, and I had my cameras, my video camera up, and other things, and we out there. We was drinking some coffee, and my mother said she kept seeing eyes in the wood line, and I couldn't see them.
Sure.
And then from there, we heard a very long, deep grunt, and I kept looking, and my mother, that sounded horrible, and I kept looking toward the chicken house, and right there beside the chicken house, there was enough light outside that I could see something squatting down, and it was rocking back and forth like it was watching us. And then it stood up and took a few steps over and then squatted back down and started rocking back and forth. Well, I had to go. And like I said, I had a puppy, and I had to take it outside to use the bathroom.
Sure.
And if you look at the front of my house, on the right side of the house, there's a pear tree. Well, it wasn't time for pears to be in because, like I said, it was April, and I was out there holding the leash, and then all of a sudden I heard that loud grunt again. And I said, "Okay, we're going in the house." And I grabbed the pup and ran in the house. It was that close to me. And so I did see it that night, but it was more of a, I could see the silhouette of it. I couldn't get a, facial features.
Right, you couldn't describe it. You just know that there was something there that was squatting down, and then it stood up, correct?
Yeah, when it was squatting down, it looked to be about, maybe about 3 or 4 foot tall squatting down, and when it stood up, it was real tall. And so I got scared. I wouldn't go outside all summer long. I mean, I wouldn't go out with only with somebody. I wouldn't go out at night or during the day. But I kept hearing it holler several times when I was out. So as my puppy got older, he was about 9 months old, I was outside in my field, and I was playing soccer with my German Shepherd with a basketball. And I was laughing, I was giggling, I sounded like a kid.
Sure.
And I'd kick it, and he'd go grab it and bring it back to me and everything like that. We was just having the best time. And my husband, he had to go check on the house. We own several houses, and he was remodeling this house.
Uh-huh.
And about that time, I heard some down up under the hill in some thick trees with undergrowth in it. I started hearing branches break, and there wasn't small twigs; it was branches. And I stopped and I listened, and then didn't hear anything. And then the next thing I heard was something huge walking through those woods, and it's so thick that a car or a four-wheeler or nothing could go through it.
Sure.
So I ran in the house, and I called my mother. This is funny. And I was telling her, I said, "Mama, is hunting season started?" She said, "No." I said, and she had me on speakerphone, and I had her on speakerphone. Well, I didn't know this at the time, but my husband drove up and walked up on the porch, and when he opened the door, I let out a blood curdling scream. That's just how frightened I was. And then he let out a scream. And then I let out a scream. And he let out 2 screams. He said, "Stop it, stop it, stop it." And my mama and sister was just laughing like crazy.
Sure.
But he got mad at me. He wouldn't let me tell him why I was frightened. And so we about a week or 2 later, I woke up. I wasn't feeling good, and I had to go downstairs. And when I fainted is what had happened. And when my head got clear, he said, "I want to ask you something. Have you heard that thing yelling and screaming?" I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "For the past 3 nights in a row, that thing has been yelling and screaming on my side of the house, and it's woke me up out of a dead sleep." And I said, "Well, did you look out the window?" He said, "No." I said, "Why didn't you wake me up?" He said, "Because I know you tell me go out there and look, see what, see what it is or whatever." And then a couple of days after that, he went out there, and we have fence, and we've got these huge posts, and he came back in. He said something had took those. Well, it knocked the boards off. It didn't break them. It knocked them off, and it took 3 posts out. And the way it took the post out, he said it looked like it rocked it back and forth and sideways to the point that it knocked it up out of the ground, and they were 3 foot in the ground. And he said, "All I have to do is just pick up the post and it'll fall on the ground." But it was kind of strange. 3 nights in a row, that thing was yelling and screaming out there, and then that happened to the post. And then I asked him, I said, "Well, did you say what did it?" He said, "No, I was just too mad. I was having to put them back in the ground."
Now they weren't.
Huh?
Now they weren't out of the ground and laying down. They were still sitting in the ground. They were just loose. Is that correct?
Oh no, they were rimmed out. I mean, they were rimmed out. I mean, they were leaning. It knocked them. It just like somebody had took them and just, shook them and shook them and shook them, and they were leaning over because the hole that it made. So I got mad because he didn't look for footprints. And let's see, let me get my notes. I wrote a bunch of notes down. Okay. Let's see, and I was telling you after we talked yesterday, the ball that I played with my dog, it came up missing. I looked all over these 7 acres here, and I could not find that basketball. So, and it's not so small that you can't see it. And I walked the wood line and everything. And about 3 months later, it showed up right on the wood line. And I really believe that they saw the dog and they got that ball.
Sure.
And I thought that was pretty strange. And then, let's see, then last summer, my husband, we planted a big garden. He started in January planting like English peas and stuff. And I was in the garden all summer long. And during the summer, I would hear wood knocks during the day, and I was hearing them during the night. And my son, his wife was going to have a baby, and she had a false alarm. And a friend of mine from Brooklyn found out about it, and she told me to call her. So my husband tells me to go outside and talk because I was really excited, and I was talking loud, and I was keeping him awake. And it was about 1 o'clock or so, and all of a sudden it sounded like somebody took a bat. And I've got 5 big oaks in my front yard, and I was sitting on my side yard, and all of a sudden I heard, it sounded like somebody took a bat and then went whack, whack. And I didn't say anything, but I cut my eyes over that way. And my friend told me, asked me, he says, what was that noise? What was that knocking noise? I said, well, I wasn't going to say anything to you, but it sounded like somebody took a bat and hit one of these trees out in front. She freaks out. I mean, it was so loud that she hears it and she freaks out and tells me to get in the house. But a lot of things have happened. My mother finally heard it. She called me one night and she asked me, she said, what are you doing? I said, I'm laying in bed watching TV. And she said that, well, you're not outside screaming, are you? I said, no, ma'am, why? And she says, well, I was just outside and I heard something just hollering, and I don't know what it is. Now, these people have lived up here all their life. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, hold on. So my husband and I went outside, and I said, Mama, I'm going to make a yell and see if you can hear me. And I did. She said, no, I can't hear you. And I said, well, stay out there for a little while and see if you hear it again. And she said, I'm not about to stay out there. Says that thing gave me the creeps.
How far away is your mother's house from where you live?
She lives about 1.5 miles straight through the woods.
Okay. So that's important because earlier you mentioned you heard something between your house and your mother's house. I was just curious how far that distance was. So.
No, my grandmother's house.
Your grandmother's house. I'm sorry.
Yeah, my grandmother's house is about maybe 3/4 mile.
Okay.
3/4 mile.
So it wasn't very far then, was it? Yeah, it's pretty close. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I started getting other calls. This lady, her husband's a minister. They're good people, and she called me and she said that her son called her outside one day and told her, said, Mama, listen to this. And she said, and she went outside. She heard it screaming and hollering, and she said, what is that? And he said, Mama, that's a Sasquatch. And I said, I told her, I said, well, doesn't surprise me any. My nephew-in-law, he was going to work one day. Now, this is a guy that said there's no such thing as a Sasquatch, and even if it was, there wouldn't be none in these woods.
Right.
And he was coming down the road, and lo and behold, he saw one on the side of the road right by her house.
Now, did he give you any description of that one, like height-wise or girth or anything?
He said it was tall and big is all he could say, and then he recanted his story. Okay. He was scared that people would persecute him and make fun of him.
Right.
See, I've had a lot of people do me that way too. And a neighbor of mine, she also said that her son and his girlfriend was going down Fire Tower Road, and one crossed in front of them. And but there has been a lot of sightings throughout the years. The first I ever heard of it, and I wasn't alive back then, but my grandfather, now he was the type that he wasn't a prankster. He was a very serious man and everything. He went through the gravel pits one night, and he saw something sitting up on the bank. And he said it looked like a bear, but had the face of a man. And so that was back in the 1930s, and he didn't know what to call it.
Sure.
But also, I don't know if I told you this yesterday, but I was back in 1977. I think I did tell you. There was this young man that was staying with us, and he was about 15, had a motorcycle, and he was dating a friend of mine. And back then, all these roads was gravel, and and motorcycles in gravel don't do too good. And,
right.
And he was going down this steep hill in front of the swamp in front of my house, and his motorcycle got to shimmying, and it made his lights flicker. And when he got almost to the bottom of the hill at the swamp on the bridge,
mm-hmm.
he saw something very tall, looked like a bear, had a face like a man, and he couldn't stop, and he couldn't turn around because of that high hill. And when he did, he just gunned it, passed it, and as he passed it, it reached out and grabbed him. Well, I had done notice how quiet it had been. Usually when there's no sounds at night, there's usually a sign of a predator around.
Sure.
And I had done mention that, but we heard him barreling down our driveway. And instead of parking his bike, cutting it off, he threw it down on the ground and busted in our door and fell in the floor, curled up in a fetal position, and was crying. And I kept saying, "What's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong?" And finally, I got it out of him, and he told us what had happened to him. And this boy, he wasn't on drugs, he wasn't drunk or anything like that. But that night he was so scared that he laid on the floor at the foot of our bed and cried and whimpered all night. Right. He definitely saw something.
Let's talk about that story there for just a second. Now, first of all, you said that was in the 70s. Is that correct?
1977. I was expecting my first child.
Perfect. Now, did he ever tell you a detailed description of what happened? Like, because I know I think you just said that it grabbed him, right?
It tried to grab him. It reached out, tried to grab him. I think it scared him because it's right there on the swamp, and it was coming down. He was coming down the steep hill, and he couldn't turn around or anything, but it reached out to grab him.
Wow.
So that's frightening.
Yeah, that would be frightening.
I think I would have slept at the foot of somebody's bed that night too.
Me too. Now you have a very large piece of property, if I recall. It's like 3,000 acres.
Yeah, we have 3,000 acres, and there's been about 5,000 acres cut around us. And I believe a lot of these animals have migrated to our property. We've got like 5 huge lakes. We have fields. We have, a lot of wildlife, turkey, deer, coyotes. I have seen a bear and all, but we have plenty of wildlife.
Sure. Now, I was going to bring that up about the 3,000 acres for the exact reason you just mentioned. You had mentioned before that there were all the cut down trees in the area around your property. And, of course, when that happens, the wildlife in that area only has 2 choices. They can go one way or they can go the other, for, a place to hide. So it makes sense that if that clear cutting was done in 2012, then it would make sense that would be when the big stuff started happening, the more frequent stuff, I should say.
It did. There was some cut in 2011 too, but more so around us in 2012. They got the back part of us in 2012.
Right.
And there is this man. Now I didn't tell you about this yesterday. I can't disclose his name or anything.
Sure, understood.
But he lives around here close, and he had this old hog, and it was huge, and it had some tusk, and his son got in there, and it messed up his leg, and they put him in the hospital. I mean, it was pretty bad. So he goes home, and he shoots the hog. And so he gets his tractor. He tries to pull it, lift it up, and every time he tried to lift it up, the front end of the tractor would lift up too. So he drug it as far as that he could, and he pulled it on the back. He drug it on the back side of his property over on a dam where there's, and he just left it there.
Sure.
Well, a couple of days later, he went to look at the hog, and it was nowhere to be found. No remains, no nothing. And it kind of gave him the willies, and he got to looking and down, and he started walking down in that ravine, and that hog was down there. It hadn't been eaten, but something had covered it up with branches and stuff like that.
So this heavy hog, which was almost too heavy for a tractor.
Yeah, I think it weighed about, he said about 1,000 pounds. It was a huge hog. It was,
sure.
And he couldn't even lift it up. I mean, every time he tried to lift it up, it'd lift the front end of his tractor up.
Right.
And he said that certain times of the year, like mine, he hears whistles around his house. He finds big footprints in his freshly ground garden and everything and all. Now, we do have caves up here, too.
Sure.
And so I'm not the only one that's having experiences with this animal, Bigfoot. And but I don't think I told you about going out in the garden with my granddaughter, did I?
No, I don't think I heard that story yet.
My granddaughter, she's 5 years old, and she loves Bigfoot, and that's all she talks about.
Awesome.
And when she comes over here, that's all she ever wants to do is watch Bigfoot movies or go Bigfoot hunting. So last fall, no, it was probably in December. I said, okay, we're going to go Bigfoot hunting. So I have my camera, and I'm recording it, and we go out into the field, my garden, and I found footprints in it, and I put my foot beside it, and I would estimate it being about 18 inches long. And not only did I find one, but I found the right and left footprints going through my garden, but they were old. But you could still see the toes and the heel and everything else.
Let me ask you a question about that trackway you found. Were they? Let's see. Like when we walk, our right foot would be off center to the right, and our left foot would be off center to the left. Was it the same way, or were they basically right down the middle in a straight line?
To be honest with you, I didn't pay that much attention to it.
Okay.
I'm just gonna be honest with you. I didn't pay that much attention. Okay. But there's nobody in the wintertime going to be going barefooted here.
Sure.
And all, but it's we've been looking and searching, and we were going to go Sunday afternoon to over to the gravel pits. Now, over at the gravel pits, we did have some investigators come, and for some reason I knew I would find a lot of evidence over at the gravel pits. Mm-hmm. It's locked up, it's abandoned and everything. Well, sure enough, we go down there, and the first thing we do is we find these pine trees and they're tall. I mean, I would say about 20, 30 foot tall, and they're bent over, and the tops are touching the ground, and they're all in the same direction, bent over, and also there's trees that are twisted, and I said, and that's usually a sign,
Sure.
They're marking, and I also told the lady that I hear it a lot between my grandmother's house and my house, and there's some oil wells back there. And I had the keys to the gate, and I had to get out of my Jeep and unlock the gate. Well, when I got out of the gate, everything was fine. And then we went down those roads going back and forth, you know, back on those roads. And then when I came back out I had to get out to lock the gate. And when I opened that door, it was just like an overwhelming stench just penetrated our Jeep. And it smelled like urine, skunk, sewage. Wow. And it was raining that day. But I do believe with all my heart that thing followed me out of those woods.
Okay.
And the day that she was also here, I told her, I said, I can kind of make a yell like it makes. And I remember I'm a woman. I'm going to sound like a woman yelling and everything. So I go out on my porch and I make my yell. She's looking at the wood line, and when I made the yell, she saw one pop its head up behind the bushes and everything. And then she told me, she said that she didn't think I just had one or two. She felt like we had a tribe here that's been here for years and years.
And when you say she, you're referring to the researchers, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
The Alabama Bigfoot Society.
Okay.
Mhm. And they're coming back. There was so much evidence. They're coming back this month, and bring more investigators and more equipment and stuff like that. But she really feels like we have a hot spot here, and but like I said yesterday, I am a no-kill. I believe that we can learn more from them by studying them in their natural habitat. That is, if we can find them.
I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, and but she definitely said she saw one, and we smelled it. It had to be really close for me to smell it, because when I went into that gate, there was no smell. When I came out, it was just overwhelming. It was just totally overwhelming.
That brings up an interesting point. I mean, you know, you're in a pretty big, large parcel of land there. You know, 3,000 acres is a lot of land. And
yes,
it is beautiful, by the way. I've seen the pictures. It's beautiful. You built a great home there, by the way. It's awesome. The size of that property, could what you have smelled, could that have been a dead deer that may have been, you know, killed by, you know, coyotes or whatever? I mean, is that a possibility, or is that something you smelled before and this is different?
This is different, and the smell wasn't there when I went in.
Okay, and that's a good point. Good point.
Yeah.
So you found, and we're going to kind of backtrack here for just a second, because I want to make sure we specify these key pieces of evidence. I mean, you found 18-inch trackways. You found trees that were twisted and broken. Now, about those trees, how big would you say those trees were around? What thickness would you guess?
I'm not for sure. It was raining. We couldn't get out of the Jeep, but they look pretty big.
Say 3 or 4 inches at least.
I would say about 4 inches around.
Okay. All right. And that's speculation, I understand. And I don't want to put you on the spot by trying to make you feel like you have to give exact measurements, because you don't know. So that's all right. Mm-hmm. But you found trees that were twisted and broke. How high were they twisted and broken?
I'm going over there and I'm going to take some pictures and I will send them to you. Like I said, I was going to go Sunday and everything. Now the trees that was bent over to, you know, to the tops were on the ground. I would say they were at least, oh goodness, they were tall, but they were young. Yet they were young, you know, trees, but yet they were real tall. but I didn't get out and measure it because it was raining and everything. But there's, like I said, I'm not going to quote until I know for sure. I don't want to speculate and then find out that it was bigger or smaller or whatever. But I will show it. I will send you the pictures.
Perfect.
And I did take a picture of that footprint that I had off my. I had a video camera, and I put it up on my TV, and then I got my camera and took it, and you can see the toes and everything.
Good. All right. Well, besides those things, you also have posts that have been pulled back and forth until they were loose enough to be leaning over. You've had relatives who have had sightings. You yourself had a sighting next to the chicken barn, I believe you said.
Yes, sir.
You've heard numerous sounds, and you had investigators come out who have found quite a bit of evidence themselves. Now that's a lot. That's a lot of information, and that's a lot of good key pieces of evidence to suggest that you have a family of Bigfoot that live right there near your home.
I believe so. I really do, and I stated this yesterday. Sometimes I'm intimidated by them.
Sure.
Like screaming at night, and the night that two was out there on the wood line screaming and hollering as loud as they could and vibrating my chest and the air around us. I think they're trying to find them a territory. In other words,
sure.
I'm being honest with you. These things scare me,
right.
And I stayed in summer all summer long because of it. And but last year, like when I was out in the garden and everything, I would hear the wood knocks. I would hear the wood knocks all during the day and stuff. But like I said, I believe there's more than one. And the lady that came up here, she says, I believe you have a tribe. And from what I understand, from my granddaddy seeing it back in the 1930s, and then the boy that saw it in 1977, they've always been here. But I do feel like there's times they do migrate. Like we had a real cold winter this year, and I haven't heard much this winter other than when the hunting season came in. When hunting season came in, just about every night they were just screaming. One night my husband hollered, says, "Can't you answer the phone?" I was on the phone with somebody and I knew it was him, but he came running in the house. He said, "They're out here having fits." And there was one north of us screaming, and there was one south of us screaming. So there you go.
Right. So there's definitely more than one. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Let me ask you this real quick. Now, you mentioned your husband quite a bit in this interview, but now, where does he stand now as far as believing in Bigfoot? Is he a believer or is he a skeptic, or how has that affected him?
Okay. Well, he's always believed in Bigfoot, but he's just not into it.
Sure.
He says, "I've got too much work to do." And as far as me, I'd heard the tales of my grandfather, and then that happened with the young man in 1977, and I was open to it. And we forgot this joke. I said, we're not finding Bigfoot. Bigfoot found us.
There you go.
But I really feel like I've been blessed.
Sure.
That they trust me enough to try to communicate or try to intimidate, because I've heard a lot of people say, well, you don't choose Bigfoot. Bigfoot chooses you. And I says, well, he must really like me. But when I was little, now I'm going to tell you, these woods were my playground. I mean, they were. I would go out and I would play all day long in the woods. And, I mean, we didn't have neighbors or anything like that. And I mean, there was nothing for me to go and play in the woods all day, but I never got lost, you know. I knew what time supper time was, and I would always make it home.
Sure.
And there's been many nights that I have walked these dirt roads, you know, by myself. Sure. And I wasn't never scared of anything. I was a brave soul, but I kind of changed my attitude about that now.
Well, Mary, I'll tell you what, I'm going to close it out by making a quick comment, if you don't mind, and that is, I've had an opportunity to talk to you at length yesterday. We have corresponded quite a bit online, and I have found absolutely nothing that would indicate that you'd be making anything up. I mean, you seem to be a very down-to-earth person. You don't sound like the type of person who make up stories, and I want you to know that I believe your story 100%, and I think that I want you to keep posted when the researchers come back. Let me know what they found, and maybe we can have you on the show again in the future. Would that be something you'd be interested in?
That'd be wonderful. Maybe someday I might come down here and visit the clan here.
I would love to, and I know we talked about that yesterday as well. And you point me in a hot spot, I'll bring a tent, and because I'm one of those people. I'm a believer, 100% wholeheartedly. I believe they exist. You can't convince me they don't.
Yeah.
And it's important because I've never seen one. I've never heard one. I've never had that smell. I've never had the experiences that a lot of people have. And I'll tell you, I want that experience. And eventually I will. I know I will. I just haven't yet.
Well, when they get to screaming and it starts vibrating the air in your chest, have you been to a concert and your chest start vibrating?
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, it's
no, that's scary.
Yeah, well, when the sound reverberates in that shock tissue, yeah, I mean, I can see that happening, and that's an amazing piece of evidence. I can't wait to have it happen.
Well, you're like I said, if you're ever down this way, give me a call, and I'll point you in the right direction. And we are going to go take pictures, and I'm going to take my video. He usually comes in March, in the fall, too. And that's when but last summer he stayed all summer for some reason. But when he comes knocking on my door, I'm not going to answer it.
If the knocking sounds loud, just go ahead and let it go.
Yeah, there's a song, I hear you knocking, but you can't come in.
There you go.
Well, it was good talking to you, and I appreciate you calling. And if you have any trouble with this one, let me know.
Absolutely will. And I do want to thank you very much for taking the time again today to go over your story again. And I think we got it this time. Okay. All right. Well, you have a blessed day. Okay. You do the same. Thank you. All right. Goodbye. Bye-bye.